The notification lit up my phone screen like a warning flare. $5,000. That was the demand. My father, Ronald, didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask why he hadn't seen me in 3 days. He just sent a Venmo request for $5,000 with a single note attached. Caleb's graduation trip. Don't be cheap. I stared at the screen, and for a second, all I could see was the ghost of 72 hours ago. My son, Noah, sitting at the kitchen table in his little tie, a half-eaten slice of cake in front of him, staring out the window at an empty driveway. 5 years old, and he spent his birthday waiting for a grandfather and an uncle who never showed up. Not even a text. Not even a lie about traffic. Just silence. And now, 3 days later, Ronald wanted $5,000 so my brother could backpack through Europe. The audacity wasn't just breathtaking. It was suffocating. Before I tell you what I sent him instead of the money and what he did to my front door when he got it, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. I want to see how far this story travels. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone across the room. I sat very still. The kind of stillness that comes right before a building collapses. My name is Haley. I'm 29. And for the last 7 years, I've made a living hunting down hidden assets for divorce lawyers and the IRS. I know how to track a lie through a labyrinth of shell companies, but it took me nearly 3 decades to audit the fraud living in my own childhood home. I looked at that text $5,000, and for the first time, I didn't see a family obligation. I saw a line item in a ledger that was bleeding me dry. I started doing the math in my head. Not the emotional math, the literal arithmetic. The $12,000 I paid to keep the house out of foreclosure 3 years ago. The $8,000 for Ronald's medical emergency that turned out to be a poker debt. The monthly contributions that kept the lights on while Caleb bought new sneakers and I ate ramen. I tallied it up, staring at the dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun. $150,000. That was the conservative estimate of what it cost to be Ronald's daughter. See, in families like mine, there is a hidden economy. We call it the scapegoat's tax. It's the price you pay just to occupy space. If you are the designated problem solver, you don't get love for free. You buy it. You buy the right to not be screamed at during dinner. You buy a week of silence with a check. You pay a premium for the illusion of peace, while the golden child, my brother, Caleb, lives tax-free, subsidized by your sweat. I had been paying a subscription fee for a father who didn't even know my eye color, just to keep the family from imploding. But looking at Noah's empty chair, I realized something terrifying and wonderful. The subscription had expired. I opened my banking app. My thumb hovered over the transfer button. The old Haley, the useful Haley, would have sent $500 and apologized that it wasn't more. She would have tried to negotiate the tax down. But I wasn't negotiating anymore. I was liquidating the account. I typed in the recipient, Ronald. I typed in the amount, $1. In the memo line, where I usually wrote things like, love you, or, for the electric bill, I typed a new message. For your dignity. It's all I could afford. It wasn't petty. It wasn't a joke. It was a receipt. It was the formal documentation that the Bank of Haley was closed. The assets were frozen. And the teller had left the building. I pressed send. The screen flashed. Transfer complete. And I felt a physical weight lift off my chest. Lighter than air. Heavier than a bomb. I set the phone down on the table, took a sip of my cold coffee, and waited for the explosion. The locksmith didn't need to be part of the story. The only thing that mattered was the click of the deadbolt sliding home 3 hours later. It was a heavy, metallic sound, the sound of a border closing. I sat in the armchair by the front window, a fresh mug of black coffee in my hands, and watched the driveway. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't cowering in the back room with the lights off. I was sitting front and center, waiting for the collision between Ronald's entitlement and my reality. At noon, the black SUV swerved into the driveway, tires crunching aggressively on the gravel. Ronald stepped out first. He didn't look like a father coming to check on his daughter. He looked like a landlord coming to evict a squatter. He marched up the walkway with his chest puffed out, the master of a domain he hadn't paid for in 3 years. Caleb trailed behind him, eyes glued to his phone, smirking at something on the screen, completely oblivious to the fact that his European backpacking trip had just evaporated into the ether. They didn't knock. In my family, privacy was a privilege I hadn't earned, and boundaries were insults. I watched through the sheer curtains as Ronald jammed his key into the lock. He tried to turn it. His wrist locked up. He frowned, pulled the key out, stared at it as if the metal had betrayed him, and jammed it back in. He jiggled it. He twisted it. Then he threw his shoulder against the wood. The thud vibrated through the floorboards, but the door didn't budge. Haley! The scream wasn't a question. It was a weapon. Open this damn door right now. He kicked the bottom panel, leaving a black scuff mark on the white paint I had applied myself 2 weekends ago. "I know you're in there. You think you can lock me out of my own house? I bought this place." He hadn't bought it. He had leveraged it, drained the equity, and then signed it over to me to hide it from his creditors, assuming I'd be too stupid or too loyal to ever claim it. He was wrong on both counts. We live in Naperville, Illinois. It's the kind of neighborhood where lawns are manicured with scissors and people pay homeowners association fees just to ensure nobody paints their mailbox the wrong shade of beige. A screaming man kicking a front door at noon isn't just a disturbance, it's a scandal. Across the street, Mrs. Higgins paused her pruning shears. 2 doors down. Mr. Henderson stepped out onto his porch, coffee cup suspended in midair. Ronald didn't care. His ego was bleeding out, and he needed an audience to stitch it back up. "She's stealing from me," Ronald yelled, turning his back to the door so his voice would carry to the neighbors. He pointed a shaking finger at my window. "My daughter is on drugs. She's high and she's holding my grandson hostage. Someone help me." The lie was so effortless, so practiced. He knew exactly what buttons to push to turn the neighborhood watch into his personal army. Caleb was leaning against the SUV now, filming the spectacle, laughing. He thought this was funny. He thought this was just another Tuesday where Dad blew a gasket. Haley cried, and eventually, the checkbook came out to smooth everything over. He thought he was watching a rerun. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was still hot. A year ago, I would have opened the door. I would have apologized for the scene, begged him to lower his voice, and transferred $5,000 just to buy the silence. I would have paid for my own humiliation. But today, looking at the scuff mark on the door and the spittle flying from my father's mouth, I didn't feel fear. I felt a cold, clinical detachment. I wasn't his daughter anymore. I was the witness for the prosecution. The performance wasn't getting the reaction he wanted. The neighbors were watching. Yes, Mrs. Higgins had actually retreated inside to call someone. Probably the association president, but the door was still closed. I was still inside. Control was still out of his hands. And for a man like Ronald, loss of control is a psychological emergency. He needed a bigger lever. He needed a weapon that could pry the deadbolt open not with force, but with authority. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. He didn't step away to make the call. He stepped closer to the living room window, right where he knew I was sitting. He wanted me to hear this. He wanted me to know that there were no lines he wouldn't cross, no scorched earth too hot for his boots. "Yes," he said, his voice dropping into a register of practiced, trembling concern. It was the voice he used on loan officers and grieving widows. "I need to report an immediate danger to a child. My grandson." I set my coffee cup down. My hand didn't shake, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I looked at Noah, who was on the floor 3 feet away, humming a song about a tugboat. Completely safe, completely loved. And outside, his grandfather was actively trying to make him an orphan. "My daughter, Haley, she's having a psychotic break." Ronald lied into the phone, his eyes locked on the curtain. "She's screaming. She's threatening to hurt him. I think she has a weapon. Please, you have to hurry. I'm afraid she's going to do something irreversible." It was a masterclass in weaponized concern. He gave them my address. He gave them my name. He painted a picture of a volatile, dangerous addict holding a 5-year-old hostage, knowing that once those words are recorded on a 911 line, the police don't just knock, they breach. He wasn't just calling for help. He was calling in an airstrike. Caleb was watching him with a look of pure awe. This was the nuclear option. This was how Dad won. You don't negotiate with the enemy. You criminalize them. You turn the state into your personal enforcer. "They're coming," Ronald shouted at the window after he hung up. "You hear that, Haley? They're coming to take him. You think you can steal my house? I'll have you committed. I'll take custody of that boy and raise him right, not like the mess you've turned into." He paced the lawn like a general surveying a battlefield, checking his watch, waiting for the sirens. He looked energized. He looked happy. He truly believed that in 20 minutes, I would be in a straitjacket. Noah would be in the back seat of his SUV, and he would be sitting in my armchair drinking my coffee. He thought he was checkmating me. He didn't realize he had just handed me the final nail for his coffin. See, Ronald forgot one thing about his daughter. I don't just balance books. I document liabilities. And false reporting of a crime? Attempting to swat your own family? That's not a family dispute. That's a felony. I stood up and walked to the hall closet. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't panic. I reached to the top shelf and pulled down a single, slim, manila folder. It wasn't thick. It didn't need to be. It contained 3 pieces of paper that would turn his nuclear strike into a suicide mission. The silence that falls when police cruisers cut their sirens is heavier than any scream. It's a vacuum. 2 squads rolled up to the curb, blue lights strobing against my living room walls, turning my beige paint into a pulsating bruise. Ronald didn't look scared. He looked relieved. He looked like a man whose Amazon package had finally arrived. He adjusted his collar, wiped the spittle from his lip, and instantly transformed from a raving lunatic into the concerned patriarch. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Caleb was practically vibrating. He held his phone up high, capturing the officers walking up the driveway. He was already composing the caption in his head. Sister gets 51-50'd. Sad day for the family. He thought he was documenting my downfall. He didn't realize he was filming evidence for the prosecution. The officers were young, serious, hands resting near their belts. They didn't see a grandfather. They saw a disturbance call in a high-tax bracket neighborhood. She's in there, Ronald said, his voice trembling with fake emotion. He pointed at my door. Please, officer. My grandson is only 5. She's unstable. She's not making sense. The lead officer, a tall man with a buzz cut, nodded and approached the porch. He raised his hand to knock. I didn't let him. I opened the door before his knuckles touched the wood. I wasn't crying. I wasn't holding a knife. I wasn't manic. I was wearing my glasses and a navy cardigan, holding a single manila folder against my chest like a shield. I looked boring. I looked sane. I looked exactly like what I am. A boring forensic accountant who organizes her spice rack alphabetically. The officer hesitated, clearly thrown by the contrast between Ronald's frantic 911 call and the calm woman in front of him. We received a welfare check. Is there a child here? My son is in the living room, I said evenly. You're welcome to check. But first you need to see this. I handed him a single document. A notarized quitclaim deed, filed 3 years earlier. Ronald had signed it when his gambling debts exploded, transferring the house to me for $10 to hide it from creditors and the IRS. He thought it was a paper trick. He forgot that a signature is law. The officer reviewed the seal, the date, then turned to Ronald. Is this your signature? Ronald sputtered. Yes, but it's my house. I paid for it. So you admit you transferred the title? The officer replied flatly. According to this deed, you have no legal claim. You are trespassing. The word hit like smoke. Ronald panicked, shouting that I'd tricked him. The officer stepped between us. You called police to remove a homeowner from her own property. That's a false report. I'm asking you once to leave. He didn't. He lunged instead. The officer moved fast. Ronald was slammed against the railing, cuffs snapping shut. Ronald Vance, you are under arrest for trespassing and disorderly conduct. As officers dragged him away, Caleb stood frozen, his phone lowered. Then his shock turned to rage. He screamed that if they couldn't have the house, I wouldn't keep the memories. He ran. I heard gasoline splash. Then fire. The old shed erupted in flames, smoke swallowing the sky. Caleb returned smiling, hands black with soot. Mom's photos. Her dress. I hope you like ash. I felt only pity. Fire trucks arrived within minutes. Caleb was cuffed. Still grinning. Gone. He spat. How does it feel to lose everything? I didn't answer. I walked to the patrol car where Ronald sat, staring at the burning ruins. He burned it, Ronald rasped. Tell me you moved it. I did, I said calmly. Mom's things have been in a climate-controlled unit for weeks. Relief flickered, then dread. The shed was empty, I continued quietly, except for your humidors and the false wall. About $200,000 in cash. Ronald went pale. Caleb didn't burn Mom's memories, I said. He burned your retirement, your bail money, everything. An hour later, the street was silent. Inside my house, my son finished his Lego tower. Did the bad men go away? Yes, I said. They aren't coming back. I added one last brick to the tower. The balance sheet was finally 0.